So there are 7 levels of wealth. Where do you fall? In this video, I'm gonna help you figure out where you stand today, and if you don't like where you're at, how you can improve your situation. So contrary to what people typically believe, your level of wealth isn't only based on how much money you earn or you have. Instead, I think a better metric to measure where you fall on this wealth level is this concept of time wealth. For example, if you have $80,000 in savings and your monthly expenses are about $4,000, then that means you have about 20 months of time wealth because you can support yourself for 20 months without working another day. On the other hand, if you have $1 million in savings, which sounds like a lot, but you spend $100,000 a month, you technically have less time wealth than the first example. You see, the point here is that your level of wealth is not just about how much money you earn or you have. It's about how much time in months or days or years that money can buy you. And starting with the first level of wealth called clarity. So this is when you have enough time wealth to support yourself for 30 days or less. You see, at this stage, you're constantly in survival mode, meaning that you're probably living paycheck to paycheck. And if you want to level up from this stage, then you're gonna have to aggressively cut your expenses. For example, groceries are becoming more and more expensive now. And since my 2025 resolution is to eat more fiber like fruits and veggies, the problem with all these fresh foods is that things go bad very, very quickly. Mainly because I forget about them and I don't end up using it. But what I found really helpful, that saves me a lot of money, is that I now keep a running list of things that I have in my fridge or in my kitchen. So every time I use something up, like a fruit or a vegetable or whatever, I remove it from the list. And I also started meal planning a lot more, where I plan out a week ahead what I'm gonna be cooking that week. So when I do buy groceries, I only buy what I need to cook, and I can always reference the list to see if it's something I already have or if it's something that I need to use. And if I forget to meal prep that week, I'll just take my documented list of all my ingredients, right? I'll ask ChatGPT what I can make with this list of ingredients, and then I'll have a whole dish ready. The point is, having this list stops me from wasting food and allows me to only buy what I actually need. The next level of wealth is called self-sufficiency, and this is where you have enough time wealth to buy about 2 to 3 months of freedom. And I remember when I was at this stage back in college, I wasn't broke, but I was very hyper aware of what I spent money on and what I couldn't afford, to the point that everything I bought became a trade-off. And when I did end up pulling a trigger on something like a concert ticket, I always had trouble being fully present and in the moment because I couldn't stop thinking about how much it cost me and what I would have to give up in the future to kind of balance out this expense. Now, eventually I did develop some sort of lifestyle changes to help limit these feelings or these mental blocks. For example, I'm not a huge partier, but when I did go out, I made sure I'd always eat a really big dinner at home so I have less urge and cravings to get drunchies at 1 a.m. We'd also always pregame at someone's house or apartment before we went out because $20 for a cocktail is kind of wild. I'd also never bring out my credit card. I'd only bring enough cash for 1 or 2 drinks max. And implementing these routines or fallback plans really helped me, making it a lot easier to save money. So I'm curious if you had any routines or strategies that you developed throughout your life. Let me know in the comments. So how can you move on to the next stage? Well, if self-sufficiency is about standing on your own 2 feet, then leveling up is about learning how to walk. The first step is to build a real financial cushion, which is having a 6-month emergency fund to cover any unexpected expenses. And according to Investopedia, for the average household, that's about $33,000. Now, unfortunately, about 73% of households don't have that much money saved up. And if that statistics includes you, don't worry, okay? Just take a deep breath and set this financial automation up. Trust me, this is gonna help a lot. So step 1 is to figure out the date that you receive your paycheck into your checking account. Step 2 is to set up a recurring transfer between your checking account into a high yield savings account, so that once your paycheck actually gets into your checking account, a portion of it is going to be automatically transferred over. And I found this really helpful because it kind of forces you to unconsciously pay yourself first, which makes it a lot easier for you to save and build out that emergency fund. And you basically want to keep doing this until you reach that 6-month savings goal. And by the way, if you are looking for a high yield savings account, I'm going to leave a video link in the description to a video where I basically rank the 16 best high yield saving accounts for 2025. And another thing that I think you might find helpful, and this is a bit more personal, but like many of you guys, I didn't grow up with money. And I realized that growing up without money, you tend to build up a lot of baggage that negatively impacts you later on in life. For example, having a scarcity mindset. But what I found really helpful, I think, is therapy, which can give you the strategies to work through this, which is why I'm really excited to talk about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. So BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible, because finding a therapist can be tough, especially if you're just limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes this easier because it's online, and by filling just a few questions out online, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't vibe with that therapist, you can just easily switch to a new one at no additional cost. You don't have to stress about your insurance or who's in your network. So if you're interested in online therapy with BetterHelp, just check out the link below this video or visit betterhelp.com/Vincent Chan. Now, clicking that link supports the channel, but more importantly, gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. Moving on, the next level of wealth is called breathing room, okay? So in terms of time wealth, you got about 3 to 6 months of freedom time. And at this stage, you're probably less anxious about money, right? You can go out to eat without needing to triple check your bank account, or you can treat yourself to something without worrying about rent. And at this stage, your relationships start to improve because according to SunTrust, about 35% of couples said money problems was their biggest relationship challenge. So now, thankfully, instead of fighting over why you can't afford to go on a hot date, you're discussing where you want to go. But there is a problem. You see, the breathing room stage can also be a trap because you might fall into this thing called the status quo bias. Like once you achieve some sort of stability, it's really tempting to stay in your comfort zone, which is fine if you're happy where you're at, but I'm guessing because you're watching personal finance videos like this, then you want to keep on pushing to be able to achieve more and earn more money. So if you're here, how can you move on to the next stage? Well, the most important thing to do is increase your income. And according to the census data, there is a strong correlation between how much you earn and your education level. For example, the median wealth for a college graduate is about 31 times more than those without a high school diploma. So if you have a high school diploma or you went to college but you didn't graduate, then consider getting an associate's degree. The reason for this is you're gonna earn a lot more money and it takes about half as much time it takes to get it compared to a bachelor's degree. Now, if you don't want to go back to school, then you can negotiate for a high salary or start a side hustle like walking dogs or teaching, becoming an Uber driver, or starting an online business. Regardless of which one you choose, you want to focus on increasing your income to put yourself in a better spot to reach the next level. The next level of wealth is called stability. This is where you put yourself a pretty good sized financial cushion. I'd say at this stage, you probably have around 6 to 12 months of time wealth. And here, although you can't buy whatever you want, you're probably not anxious anymore about money, right? If your car breaks down, you know that you can afford to get it fixed. This is when you might start to think bigger, like should you buy a house or go on a nice luxury vacation, right? Things start changing in your career too. Like if you feel your job doesn't serve you anymore and you hate it, then you know you have a bit more options. One of the best ways to level up to the next stage is to prioritize on spending assets before liabilities. In the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the author Robert Kiyosaki says that an asset is something that makes you more money, while a liability is something that costs you money. For example, investing in the stock market is an asset because it can make you more money, while investing in a car is a liability because it loses value and depreciates over time. And one of the easiest ways to build assets is investing in stocks and bonds. For example, if you are 25 and you invest $900 a month into, let's say, an S&P 500 index fund that has an average annual return of 10%, then in 25 years, you'd have over $1 million. And if you want to speed this up, what I found really helpful is following this thing called the 50-50 rule, which simply means every time I got a raise, a bonus, or a Chinese New Year money, or my grandma gives me some cash for Christmas, I'd invest at least half of it, right? You still get to enjoy some of your money and it'll help you move to the next stage a lot faster. The next stage is called flexibility, and it's a real critical milestone for time wealth because you're able to buy about 1 to 2 years of life. You see, at this stage, you start to get a taste of what financial freedom feels like. Like you can take a 6-month sabbatical and travel the world if you wanted to, or you can start that business you've been sketching on napkins for the past 5 years. And the way I like to think about this stage is you are finally moving from financial security into financial opportunity. And leveling up to the next stage really heavily revolves around reducing your taxes and investing strategically, because taxes are undoubtedly going to be one of the largest expenses of your life. And while you have to pay it, there are many ways in which you can reduce your tax bill legally. For instance, you've got the 401k, where in 2025, you can contribute up to $23,500 if you're under 50. If you're older than 50, you can make additional catch-up contributions of around $7,500. Then you've got your Roth IRA with the contribution limit of around $7,000 with a catch-up contribution of an additional $1,000 if you're older than 50. Then you've got your HSAs, where you can contribute up to $4,300 for self-coverage and $8,550 for family coverage. The point is, take advantage of these tax advantage accounts to reduce your taxes now or in the future and invest that money. The next wealth level is called financial independence. And in terms of time wealth, you can effectively buy about 30 to 60 years of time if you play your cards right, okay? You probably heard the saying, you wanna make your money work for you. Well, at this stage, your money is literally working harder than you have to. By now, your investments like stocks, your rental properties, or other passive income streams can now effectively cover your living expenses completely, entirely. But one of my favorite things about financial independence is that the power dynamic at work completely shifts. You see, work is no longer something that you have to do. It's something that you can choose to do. And at this stage, your mindset also starts to shift from accumulating money to optimizing your money. Statman calls this the transition from utilitarian to expressive wealth. For example, before I got into this stage, I only saw money as a tool, as a way to pay back bills, right? It was completely practical. It was basically to survive. But once I achieved financial freedom, I started using that money to reflect who I was and what I valued. Like I started donating money to causes that I cared about, like education for underserved communities. I also spent more money investing in myself as well. One example being is, for a long time, I always thought investing in a coach or a course was a scam because you can basically find all the information you need online for free, which is completely true. But now, despite thinking this way and having this belief, I still invest in courses and coaches myself, because the truth is, if you want to learn something, you're going to pay for it, right? You either pay with your time or you pay with money. You can spend weeks looking through the pile of information that's available online, trying to sift through everything, trying to find the right information and piece it together yourself, spend weeks trying it and just hoping that it works. Or you can just spend some money and have all the information readily available to you and know that it works. There really is no objective right or wrong when it comes to this. It really depends on whether you value your money more or you value your time more, because you're going to be paying with one of those regardless. Now, you might think this is the last stage, but there is still one more. You see, the key to leveling up here is being more intentional with your investments. It's no longer about saving your extra money in a bank account and investing in the stock market. Rather, it's more about how you use debt effectively. You see, most people, they understand debt as something to be really, really bad with like credit cards. But for people at this level of wealth, they can use debt to their advantage. And a good example of this is there are a lot of multimillionaires out there where they still take out multi-million-dollar loans to buy properties, not because they can't afford it, but because they can use their actual cash to invest in other assets that can make them more money. If we look at the breakdown of assets for actual economic wealth categories in the US, you can see that most of the upper class wealth is held in business equity and stocks, meaning some of the wealthiest people in the US take out loans not just to buy real estate for themselves, but also on non-home ownership types of real estate, like office complexes, residential apartments, or motels. Moving on, the final stage of wealth is called abundant wealth. In terms of time wealth, you don't just have freedom for the rest of your life anymore, you have freedom for future generations, like your children and your grandchildren. In other words, this is generational wealth. At this stage, your options are nearly limitless. And the beauty of having abundant wealth is that your money can extend far beyond just living a really comfortable life. If you are a good person, which I hope you are, you can actually use some of your money to create something positive and lasting and good for the world. You see, Andrew Carnegie once said, "The man who dies rich dies disgraced," which is where the idea of moral responsibility of wealth comes into play. But this kind of leads me into something that you've got to start accepting. As someone who's worked in finance for about 8 years, I can easily recognize the signs that lead to someone becoming rich. So if your goal is to get rich one day, click here to learn the 9 signs to see if you're doing them.